Alright guys, so I recently did a 30-day sight reading challenge on Sonatinas. For the most part, I used this book over here, 35 Sonatinas by 10 composers for solo piano, Bartok, Beethoven, Clementi, such and such. And the reason I decided to do this challenge is because I recently had an audition for a college program. This was back around the last week of March, and I prepared some pretty hard pieces. I think I prepared two Scarlatti Tausig sonatas, prepared the first movement of the Beethoven Tempest Sonata, and I prepared the Andante Spianato from Chopin's Opus 22. And at the end of this audition, just like the piano part of it, the professor said, I'm going to put something in front of you, can you sight read it? Now mind you, this was not included as part of the audition at all. This was not a music performance audition that I was going for, but it was for a music therapy audition. So I was a little taken aback by that, but I mean, I felt like I played pretty well, so I don't know how big sight reading would factor into that. Needless to say, it was pretty bad. Some of you guys might know the Bach Minuet in G major. This piece was honestly easier than that, probably something your average beginner would play after like, I don't know, a month or 2 months. Now, it did have a lot of ledger lines. The melody in the treble clef was usually 2 to 3 ledger lines above the regular staff, so that was pretty tricky. I would say my rhythm was pretty solid overall, but my right hand was pretty bad. So definitely a humbling experience for me, and just kind of made me reflect on a couple things in my piano journey, which is what I want to talk about today. So one of the first things I really started to reflect on just after this audition and a little bit more during this challenge that I did for myself was that I am not reading enough music. I wasn't reading enough music. I was reading music to memorize. All the pieces I prepared for the audition I did from memory, and while I think I did a pretty good job, one of the struggles I have been having with learning new music is that it takes me too long to read through the treble and the bass clef together, and it feels like things are just generally a lot harder than they should be. So after this, I thought maybe there's a way I can start reading more music, kind of like sight reading every day. I have the Mikrokosmos by Bartok that my first piano teacher recommended to me, but I just found those usually just to not be to my musical taste. And then I realized I have this Sonatina book my girlfriend, when she was taking her first piano classes at school, her teacher recommended that she get this book, and looking through the book pretty quick, I saw a lot of these shouldn't be that hard overall, and I thought it would be a great thing to give a shot. Definitely say that at the beginning of me doing this challenge, I didn't really have much of a plan. My original plan was I'll learn a complete sonatina every day for the month of June. I'm out of school for the summer and I'm not working as much, so I technically would have enough time, but then I realized if I were to do that, I'm not going to have time to practice the rest of my repertoire. In any case, I switched it to where I was only learning one movement every day. It would be the first thing I would do in my practice. I would sight read, then I would spend 20 to 40 minutes, usually not more than that. Except for a couple of them, I spent probably about an hour, and I think the most I spent prior to recording for a video on a given day was about an hour and 20 minutes, if I'm not mistaken. An hour and 20, an hour and 30 minutes in total. The goal was to read more music, so having it be perfect wasn't usually the goal, but I definitely enjoyed that challenge of getting something up to speed pretty quick. So I guess you might be wondering, why would I sight read something as easy as Sonatinas? Again, I mentioned that my reading hasn't been that good, and one of the things I reflected on was just like the type of teacher that I had. Now this is a little tricky for me to discuss, but I just want to say up front, I loved all the teachers that I have had, and absolutely felt like they were the right teacher for me at that point in my journey. I think it's more just that I wasn't the right type of student at the time, or I wasn't in the right mindset to be the best student. But in regards to my first teacher specifically, there were some concerns that came up as I was thinking about my piano journey during this 30-day challenge. And one of the things was, again, I absolutely loved my first teacher, but she wasn't a classical piano teacher, and she herself even mentioned that in our first lesson. She was mainly a singer who could play piano, and she could play piano pretty well, and her singing was really good from what I've heard on her records. So I had a trial lesson with her, and I really enjoyed the trial lesson. Her energy was pretty good, and I was a complete beginner, so at the time I was like, does it really matter that she's not a classical piano teacher? I mean, she can teach me like at least like the basics, and like she could teach theory in her own words, and she did all of those things. I took lessons mostly weekly with her for about, I want to say, 1.5 to 2 years, and it was very good for me. I feel like I learned a lot. We played through a John Thompson book. We played through this first year of piano classics, which introduced me to some small pieces by composers like Bach, some very small Mozart pieces and stuff like that. So it was a lot of fun. But being that she wasn't a classical piano teacher, it did mean that after a certain point, she herself said there wasn't really much more that she could teach me in the realm of classical piano. If I wanted to learn other piano styles with her, then she would possibly be able to help with that, but not the classical piano. So I stopped taking lessons with her, and I stopped taking lessons in general. And this was I think a pretty bad move on my part overall, because I didn't really have guidance at that point, and this went on for probably about 1.5 to 2 more years after my last lesson with her, up until I went to school for music. And you know, I had some group piano classes there, and at that point, because of my prior experience, I was already far advanced into what they would offer. And at this time, this community college didn't offer private lessons, which was, you know, another not so good decision for myself. But overall, you know, just all that to be said, my first teacher was incredible, and while she may not have been the classical piano teacher that I might feel like I needed at the time, she was certainly extremely influential in my journey. I remember leaving her lessons every week and just feeling very inspired and very happy and enjoying practicing because of her. And it was actually because of my first lessons with her that I decided that I myself wanted to be a music teacher. Teacher in general, but more for music, and that is a goal that I reached. I teach guitar and bass to kids mostly, but you know, maybe not the best classical piano teacher for me, but the best teacher for me, taken holistically, I think she absolutely was. Lesson for you, if you want to take something away, get a teacher, and get a teacher that you really enjoy. I think that'll be more important than a specific focus. Another thing that I realized during this challenge, not to sound egotistical, but I'm better at reading music than I actually thought. The first 2 videos I put up was just me straight up reading for the first time I believe it was 2 Beethoven Sonatinas, just straight off the bat, no preparation, open the book and just start reading it. And they're pretty brutal, very rhythmless overall. So if you manage to watch any of that, you would see it's not particularly engaging, but I think it was still a good reference point for me to start off, because it was really after that second to fifth day that I started to pick up these patterns pretty quickly, and I picked them up fast enough that I realized that I'm a little better at reading music than I thought. I just kind of needed to have the regularity of reading music that I'll be able to apply that skill a little faster, kind of like shaking off the dust, you know. So I was surprised at how fast I was able to pick some stuff up, and you know, maybe that's where you are too. Maybe you just need to read more music more often to improve your reading. And the last thing that I really started to feel as I was doing this challenge was that playing more easier pieces is a lot of fun. So at the end of my first year and a half of piano lessons, I was playing the Chopin Waltz in A minor, the one that was published after his death. I learned one of his mazurkas in G minor as well. And then I picked up the Scarlatti Sonata, the K9 Sonata in D minor, which wasn't really too much of a jump. I think it was pretty good difficulty jump overall. However, I didn't have a teacher, so after that I immediately jumped to some pretty hard pieces. I started learning the Minute Waltz from Chopin's, I believe it's the Opus 64, number 1. I started learning the Andante Spianato from Chopin's Opus 22. I started learning the first movement of the Beethoven Tempest Sonata. And those were pretty significant jumps at the time. I never learned any Sonatinas. I played some Bach, but I never learned like his fundamentals, like any preludes. Didn't learn any of his inventions, which I'm actually starting to work on now. I never learned a Mozart sonata, a Haydn sonata, stuff like that. So I really skipped kind of like the entire intermediate repertoire range for solo piano. And you know, I do think that stunted me in a lot of ways. And having done this challenge, it kind of brought me back to fill in those gaps, because I've been having a lot of fun with these sonatinas. I definitely have a few that I've been practicing regularly after I did this, after I recorded the videos for it. And playing new music every day and keeping things fresh, it's just also a good way of keeping me engaged rather than practicing the same 3 pieces for like 6 months that are way too hard for me. Making some progress, but very slow progress, practicing way too much to get to where it should be. Just to give you an example of what practicing way too much was like, I was practicing the first movement of Beethoven's Tempest Sonata probably religiously about 2 to 4 hours every day for 2 months, and I just barely finished the entire first movement. I think with where I'm at now, if I were to try and pick that up again, I could probably learn it in about 2 to 3 weeks, practicing I would say about 2 hours every day. So this is, you know, pretty significant jump in difficulty, just meant more time wasted. And I've been enjoying working through intermediate repertoire, learning my first Mozart sonata after a pretty long time, but it's a lot of fun, and it's a good challenge, but not so much of a challenge where I feel like I'm wasting time. So yeah, those are my main reflections here for this 30-day Sonatina challenge. I think just to close up this video, have a couple fun facts. My favorite Sonatina from this challenge, I think, was definitely the Kulau Sonatina, the Opus 20, number 1. It kind of starts like the Easy Sonata by Mozart. I believe it's the K545. It's a lot of fun, has these like fast scalar runs in the right hand, which again I kind of skipped over early in my piano journey, so that was a lot of fun. My least favorites, I would say it was from the 29th day of the challenge. It was the Evening Song by Fritz Spindler, I believe was his name. I didn't really like it, not for any particular reason. It just took me a little longer to get when I felt like it was easier than the sheet music portrayed. So musically, it was nice. Just took me a long time, and I was felt a little disappointed about that. I also discovered a new composer, Gidi Antonín Benda, a Czech composer from the late Baroque era. Has some pretty cool sonatinas, 34 in total, and I think I recorded three of the easier ones, the shorter ones, and I think they're a lot of fun. Definitely check them out. Will kind of remind you of like C.P. Bach combined with Mozart in a way. If you're into that style of music, definitely give him a shot. And yeah, so those are my reflections. If you guys made it this far, appreciate you guys giving this a shot. Enjoy the rest of your day.